Hello and welcome. I'm Anita, the Henry and Lois Foster Director and Chief Curator at the Rose Art Museum. Thank you for joining us for Encore Presentations, a new series highlighting standout programs from the archives, celebrating the museum's history of engaging artists in critical conversations. Tonight's Encore presentation is from 2014 and was part of the Art, Blackness, Diaspora initiative. This program features a riveting conversation between artist Mark Bradford and Brandeis University professor Anita Hill. I hope you enjoyed tonight's Encore presentation and welcome you to visit the Rose to experience Bradford's monumental installation, Waterfall, currently on view in our exhibition, Recollections, 6 Decades at the Rose Art Museum.
Okay, everyone. I think it's about time to get started. I think if I wait any longer to begin the panel, the building may collapse under the weight of attendance. So many people. It's amazing. This is even more than Ellsworth Kelly.
Oh.
I mean, no comparison intended. I'm Christopher Bedford. I'm the director of the Rose Art Museum, and I have the privilege of probably moderating in a very small way this very exciting conversation this afternoon. But first of all, I have to thank a few important people, and I have notes on my iPhone, which is unusual. This conversation is part of a series called Art, Blackness, Diaspora, and it's organized by the Department of Fine Arts in collaboration with the African and African American Studies Department, the Rose Art Museum, and generously funded by Brandeis Arts Council as well. So it's emblematic of our interdisciplinary aspirations at the university, the one university ethic, and the idea that this institution is very much a part of everything that is central to Brandeis's mission. And then a special last thank you to Anita and Corey, who's actually sitting down there on the floor, which doesn't seem entirely appropriate for somebody that was so instrumental in putting all of this together. So thank you, Anita. I'm going to spend very little time introducing these two, mostly because I think it's completely unnecessary for this audience, and because I'd far rather listen to them talk than me. This is Mark Bradford, and that is Anita Hill. That's about so that's about as far as I'm willing to go with the introductions. And clearly you all know them. So one thing I would say is I was in a session just before this when Mark was speaking to about 25 students, and it occurred to me that, you know, when I first met Mark and walked into his studio, I thought, okay, this is 1 in a million. This artist is 1 in a million. Then it occurred to me in the context of him talking to students, this is 1 in 100 million, at least. So then if you add to that Anita, then we may be dealing with 1 in a billion. So
great.
A great privilege to be with you both. So I'm going to ask one leading question, and we'll see where that takes us. So Mark was speaking to students today, and in the context of a symposium yesterday about the history and progress of abstract painting, we're having a collective discussion about the way histories are narrated, both institutional histories, histories of art, personal histories. And one thing that emerged from that conversation is the idea that you can package history so that it reads in a really linear, neat fashion. And that's what we see in art history textbooks. And if somebody asked me to narrate my life, I would certainly point to the high points, and it would just seem like a linear progress ascent towards directing the Rose Art Museum. But it really isn't like that at all. And it's a messy progress. It's a messy progress on a personal level. It's a messy progress on an institutional level. It's a messy progress through a professional life. And I think Mark's very unguarded way of discussing that is inspiring to students. And I suspect that there are real parallels between Anita's progress through her personal and professional life and Mark's progress through his personal and professional life. So I wanted to just begin with that question. Messiness versus the linear version, and which is preferable?
Well, that's interesting. Anita.
I'll let you start. because everybody knows about my messiness.
That was good. You know, and publicly.
Yes.
But the thing is, okay, but that's an interesting thing. I think that if you have the ability to be both messy and public and to still move forward, I think that that makes everybody feel part of the conversation. I think that often linearness and packaging something can kind of distance people. We don't feel like we're in that conversation because, well, you're perfect. And when someone can stand up and be in this turbulent messiness and say, I'm here and I'm as present as I can be, and this is what we're involved in, I find that more human, just really, really human. That's why I feel like when I met you, I felt like I knew you.
Well, I absolutely agree with you that the messiness really is what allows people to enter. Yeah. And really, and I do believe that ability to allow people into your conversation and into your life has what makes you significant and relevant. I think for so many of us, we live these very guarded lives about our careers, especially if you're academics, because in some sense we're trying to convince our students that, wow, it's absolutely perfect. You go to school, you get the best grades, then you go to graduate programs, you get to the best graduate or professional program, and then it just works like on, and then you get the best job at Brandeis University, and then you retire, and that's it. And we don't, because that's somehow the myth that enables us to continue doing what we're doing. But the real honest conversation does involve, for me, the admission that I really had no intention of being at Brandeis talking about social justice. My intention was to be an international commercial law expert and to go live in Paris or someplace in Europe. And I was on that trajectory, and then the messiness sort of took over. And so, but if it had not been for the public engagement and allowing people into that messiness, I don't think that I would have been here today. Yeah. And I don't think I would be nearly as fulfilled in that career as I am today. So there are benefits to it. It's a little scary, though.
Yes, it is. I mean, God, you know, we have a lot of, interesting parallels. The only thing that I knew, because I wasn't on an educational track when I was in high school, if someone said what was an SAT, I'd probably think it was a new cable channel. I had we were worrying about getting the hair and the clothes and going to clubs. So the only thing that I knew was, because I liked to be out and about, I used to love to go to the airport and look at planes coming and going. So I thought I'd be a flight attendant. Well, I grew to be 6'8", and I thought, oh, well, that's not going to happen.
You're not going to be comfortable at all.
I didn't have plan B. I was just like, well, that's not going to happen. And the messiness of street life just kind of flooded in. Because if you're not on an educational track and you just go to a job, well, the street life just pours in, clubs and everything that comes with it. And it was scary. I learned things, rough bumps, but getting here was not linear. And I wanted to be a flight attendant. I wanted to work for TWA.
But wasn't it a very heroic and brave decision to be an artist?
No.
It wasn't?
No. You were brave. No. No brave.
But you didn't have any roadmap for being an artist, did you?
I didn't have a roadmap with anything, so it was fine. It's like I didn't have roadmap. I mean, you know, the counselor in high school, Mr. Bradford, what do you want to do? I don't know. You got any options? I don't know. So I was always creative. I worked in my mother's hair salon. My crib was in my mother's hair salon. My mother was like a hairdresser, not a stylist, hairdresser. And I was always creative. I remember at 9 years old, my mom picked me up from school. She said, I got to run back to the hair salon. She said, Mark, you see all those wigs in the back? I said, yeah, Mom. She said, make something happen on them. I got to go back and work on the clients. So I'm back there styling the wigs. Back then we had wigs, not weaves.
I still have wigs.
They're easier.
I love my wigs.
They're easier. You know, you can put on a sky piece and go.
Oh, that's great.
I don't know. I call them sky pieces. I don't know why. Anyway.
Works for me.
You can put it on. So I was always creative, but creative had a life. It was something you accessed and you lived in. It wasn't something I'm putting on my art helmet now, and I'm going to be an artist. It was like part of my life. When we changed the prices, I would always do the calligraphy on the wall. Press and curl, $15. Jerry curl, $55. Yes, we did do Jerry curls.
Do people,
It was
they,
the 80s.
They don't even know what it is.
I know that, laughing. Let me tell you something about the Jerry curl. Let me defend the Jerry curl for a minute.
Okay.
In the hair salon, you're making $25 a press and curl. That's a little bit, you do 5 or 6 people in a day. The Jerry curl came along, you could make $50 and $60 off one head. It quadrupled the money. Don't talk bad about the Jerry curl.
In the same amount of time.
In the same amount of time. I got to defend the Jerry.
Okay. So, but we talked earlier about this because it seems to me that being in that as a very racialized and gendered space had to shape the way you think about art and how you present it and even the process, because we know in hair salons it's all about the process.
Oh, yes, a lot of process.
So,
from Africa to Asia.
And so what else did you learn, though? What did you learn in the hair salon from the women who were there?
To get up. Get up. Stop whining. I'm sorry they're calling you a sissy. I love you. Figure it out. I'm going through stuff too. I saw so many women quietly heroic. Black women go through some stuff, honey. I mean, the ones I experience on a day, but I hate to make people heroic. I feel like this burden of people being heroic. But the women that I saw, they dealt with the good, the bad, the ugly, just with such dignity. Oh, it was messy sometimes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, they were messy. And I just learned when I started becoming attacked, bullied, they call it bullying now, but my mom just told me, you got to find a way to get across that schoolyard. Mm-hmm. She was always there for me. She would pick me up sometime. I just saw women just dealing with it. Mm-hmm. And I think I just learned to get up and to have humor. Mm-hmm. Laugh,
Well, and the other thing that you talked about, the art just being part of what you did.
It
wasn't anything contrived or something that was outside. Did you have to move into the art world when you went to school?
No.
You were living in in a creative world.
Always, and I was living. I love the idea of watching people present themselves. I loved the women getting the hair done and putting the makeup on and singing the Marvin Gaye song off tune in the mirror. I look good, honey. I used to like watching them, and they would say, Mark, I look good. I said, yeah, girl, you look good. And I just like that kind of process of presentation, and then they would leave. Like they would hit the door, okay, I'm ready now. And and I love that presenting themselves. Not my biological grandmother, but the only person I knew. She was 90 years old when she passed away, and every 2 weeks I'd have to put her on a long plank, take from her house, put her on a long plank, wash her hair, put her black dye on, put her red lips on. She wanted to look good. So this presenting themselves, I love that.
So does that influence your art today, do you think? The presentation of it? I mean, because this is dramatic.
Yeah. Oh, you know what? Okay. Now that I'm thinking, because I kept looking, I'm thinking, it is funny. I worked in a hair salon where we process the hair. There's a lot of natural movement going on. Some people don't process the hair, but the hair salon I worked in, we processed the hair. We did relaxers and press and curl. We straightened hair. That's just how I made money, with a rag over my shoulder. I mean, hardcore. And so I took something from one state and I pushed it to another. Now, looking at my paintings, I'm kind of realizing that I take paper, which is not an art material, and I push it to be something else. I demand that it does something else. It's not that much different.
From doing my hair?
It ain't that much different, honey. You wet that hair and it goes way back. And then you got to reel it on the other side, right? So it's not that different. It's not that different. Now, this is what I did. I mean, we all have politics around hair now. Hair has become a very political site. But that wasn't my relationship to it. I was a merchant, and they came for me to do a very particular thing. And it's really interesting because I would have to will that hair into what they wanted. And I have to will this paper into looking like paint. I have to will it, because sometimes it doesn't want to go there. And I'm just determined. I've never thought about parallel. I'm just determined to get it to look like a painting and to sit next to a painting and occupy that same space. I don't know. Well, yeah. I mean, we had a lot of those little sayings. Yeah. There are different parallels, but working hard to, it's like alchemy, to turn it into something else. But I did that with my body. Not, I mean, I didn't become something else. I'm not like transgendered or anything, but I meant like, they said I was this. Mark ain't much gonna, you're not gonna, it's not gonna work out for you. And I willed it into yes, it will. So I guess this kind of, yes, it's not like yes, we can. It's like yes, we can, yes, I can in a way. Yeah, maybe it's the same kind of process or some thinking.
I was also fascinated earlier, you were talking about history and looking at 16th century and sort of moving that and shaping that in a way so that it shows how history repeats itself. And how, can you talk a little bit about what you told me about that? Because I do see some parallels to some of the work that I've been trying to do. So the use of primary materials and stories, and how do you, talk a little bit about.
Well, I just love social histories. I love art history. I love history in general. I don't always believe it, but I really love to read. I've always loved to read, and I just stumbled on loving to read because I was having nightmares. I was about 13 years old, and I was having nightmares. I was in the grocery store with my mother, and I said, Mom, it's like sleeping is a hard part. And she looked over at the racks, and she said, well, try reading, and I picked up a book. It wasn't like, oh, you need to read. It was like, well, try reading. I picked up a book, and it was a big book, like 400 pages. And I finished it. I couldn't believe at 13 years old I finished the book. I was like, where does this come from? Just natural. Like, you were probably always smart. I'm sure you all were smart. You were smart. Where'd it come from? Like, where does it come from? It's just these things. It's like in your little toolbox of things you discover. So I was very fascinated. I've always been fascinated by maps and map making and how we divide up the land. It's all just basically who's in power. That's all it is. And so, and the sea. And there was a book I stumbled on called Sea Monsters. And when people first started depicting the ocean, they thought it was full of magical, dangerous beings, mermaids and half walrus and half snake. And it was really just because it was the unknown. And so I really started thinking that was really interesting, how we make the unknown dangerous and cautionary. Be careful when you go there because it'll eat you up. And also the sexy cash, this kind of foreclosure. I found there's the same thing going on today. People preying on people in crisis, going to other lands, waving shiny beads and taking something. It's colonizing thing going over in it. So I didn't see that much difference between these 16th, and 17th century propaganda maps in a way, because oftentimes the cartographers would put certain imagery in certain bodies of water because they wouldn't want other explorers to come and steal before they got there to steal. So it became this really map that they could use for exploitation. And I just found that really interesting. And then when I just saw the sexy cash on the telephone poles, I just thought, well, sexy, well, okay, sex, like sexy, like porn or something. What is that? I guess they make the cash sexy and then they take your house. So I just saw this foreclosure kind of, it's kind of breaking the covenant. You sinned because you didn't keep up your part. So therefore, you're in sin. So therefore, when a person is sinning, bad things happen to him. It's always about this kind of umbrella, this contract.
Well, those of us who, you know, part of the series, the title of the series is Diaspora. So those of us who work at Brandeis and have been exploring the diaspora, one of the things that we have tried to do in a way is to map. So to map the connections, the African diaspora connections, not only to look at the travel from the continent of Africa to the Americas, but also to map, even within this country, the migration and the movement, and to do it over time. And so that was one of the things that I was seeing as a real parallel in some of the work that I've been doing. And it's really interesting to me that we both came out of that mapping at the same place with the foreclosure crisis as a significant point in thinking about what all of those years of history has brought us to, and the fact that we're not really talking about new things, but we're talking about history repeating itself. Now, you're able to express that in art. You are. Yeah. I think we'd all agree that you're able to express it.
That's true.
And to capture that in the signs of what is it they're trying to say to us about sexy cash. Sexy cash is better than owning your house. Right. Having this money in hand because maybe you've signed an agreement that you didn't really understand or that you were misled into signing. It's a way for you to come out of this experience. But the other side of that is you've revealed this now. You talk about things repeating. Does it make you ask the question, what's next? What's the next pitfall? Where are we going to be going after this?
I always wait for the next poster. I'm always wondering what the next, I call them merchant posters, going to be, because they have a very small demographic. They're very temporal. They're for people who take public transportation, and they're for economically, I would probably say, on the lower end of the economic food chain. And I always wonder what's the next hit. And when I see them, yesterday I saw a merchant poster, funerals, $1,962. And I thought, ooh, like, as soon as you see the difference I find with middle class advertising and what I call kind of bottom line or poor advertising, middle class advertising creates the desire in you. You want this Apple computer. They create the need in you, and then you go buy it, a certain class of it. You have access. You want this car. You want this. It's just the opposite. There's already a need, a crisis. They step in and exploit.
Like the desperation.
The desperation is always there, and it's really weird because I often wonder how they know that. I mean, how can they figure out that this community can only spend $2,000 on funerals? There must be first of all, that tells you there's a lot of people dying, probably a lot of young people, either, it's always through gang related or something. And so they already know that. So how do they get this information? How do they know that they can put a sexy cash poster in this area and it will work? I mean, it will work. I don't.
And it is interesting, how do they price point it? But they also, all they have to do, unfortunately, is read the newspapers. And they know at least enough about the economics in poor communities that, most of the people who are living there are not, not earning a salary that's going to be able to even support them and to provide shelter, much less if their child dies. Especially if it's a child who's been on the streets or who's never had an employment, when we know the unemployment rates of poor Black and brown youth. So they know that, in fact, these people are vulnerable and that their parents are the ones who are going to have to pay for that. They're not looking to get that $1,900 from the children, they're getting it from parents who are already stretched.
Right.
So the economics of it, it is very cynical, but it's also quite smart.
Yeah.
And so you are able to find those. How is it, though, that some of us will look at that sign and we'll say, oh, isn't that, I guess I would look at it and say, oh, here's another thing for me to think about, economic exploitation, and to write about it from that point of view. I'm not sure how I would get to art from that.
Oh, yeah. I've asked myself like that. I think that when I graduated, I think in 1998, 1997, 1997, 8, one of those years, I can't remember, I was very much aware that I was Black. People told me I didn't think too much about it until I got in art school, and they're like, well, you're Black. And I said, ooh. And we're going to tell you what that means. And I thought, oh, I'm not even sure what that means. And so everything felt really figurative to me. It felt very contained, and we're going to tell you who you are. Sexually, we're going to tell you. Racially, we're going to tell you. And I thought, I'm not so sure. And at the same time, musically, hip-hop was telling the world what quote-unquote Black America was. This is what Black America looks like. I'm from South Central, and Black America looks like this. It felt figurative. Everything felt very well described. Black people do this. They wear this. They talk this. And I thought, oh, boy. And I got out of school at this raging moment when everybody knew what South Central was. They knew what it smelled like, they knew what I went to China. They're like, what's up? I said, oh. Like, I'm way too old for you to say what's up to, but okay. You don't even know, like, generationally. And I felt so figurative. It felt so I thought, oh, God. But my studio was in South Central. So I thought, oh, my God, how can I be Black and in South Central and be an artist? And I just said, I'm just going to abstract it. I'm going to look for the little details that point to something else. I am going to find other conversations and abstract it. That was my radical political moment when I just pushed back against figuration and people telling me what things look like. And so I always look for details that point to more class. And a lot of times race is embedded in class. Merchant posters, billboard material, ephemera of urbanness. We know when people say, well, the urban environment, well, we know what they're talking about.
Yeah.
Well, urban, the urban environment, urban. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna abstract it. I'm gonna find I'm just gonna abstract it. I'm gonna pluralize it, I'm gonna open it up, and I'm gonna find other relationships in it. And that was my way of, I'm going to be Black to the day I die, I get it. But what that means is a constantly shifting landscape like the urban environment. And so I look to things that a detail that points to a social condition more than points to a racialized space. Does that make sense?
Let me ask you this, though, because you talked to me also about your foundation.
Yeah.
So you're now having young people come into this space, and that once was a beauty shop.
Beauty shop, yeah.
Yeah, the hairdresser,
Hairdresser,
parlor.
yeah. All
All those things.
Yeah.
But and they're coming in and with a different experience from the one that you grew up
Yes.
in. So how do you then translate? How do you address young people in your organization, in your foundation? Tell me about that work and how it's gone and what you're learning.
Well, it's part art. We have an exhibition space which shows contemporary arts, which is what we talked about earlier. Contemporary ideas, that's it. It's an all-black community. It's just contemporary ideas, not Afrocentric ideas, not just contemporary ideas. That's it. And so, Bell Hooks, Carol Walker, just contemporary ideas. We have an artist residency program because it's an artsy neighborhood, but there are no artists working. So how can there be a conversation? So we have 3 artists in residence. And then on the practice side, it's art and practice. On the practice side, we are partnering with the Right Way Foundation, which is a job placement agency for foster youth. So it's an 8-week program, and it's all job training, job readiness, interviewing techniques, computer literacy. It's on the ground, same people like me when I was 17 years old and didn't study for the SAT. It's not the high learning from foster care into Stanford. It wouldn't be that group. It's like right before the poll. I'm always like, girl, come on. So it's not it's me. It's me. Me. She's like, no, he didn't say right before the because prostitution, prisons, homelessness, way up when TAYs, foster youth. So the social service, they enroll them and we get them jobs. We have about 70% employment success that they're placed. We have 300 jobs guaranteed. And I love it because I go back to me not being prepared and wandering for 10 years, and I can look them in the face and say, look, I know what you're getting ready to go. If you don't get this job, there's lots of other things that are waiting for you, and they're not going to be as good as that job at Rite Aid. Get the job at Rite Aid. It's a platform. It's an economic platform. I teach part of it. I teach the job readiness part of it from the aesthetic, because I'm an artist. What to wear, what to say, the clothes. I take them shopping. Tell them about the hair, because I know about hair. not from the and you ask them to come in what they think is interviewing clothes. This all class is so embedded in all this. They come in club clothes. And then you have to say, okay, that's fine, it's the starting point. Beyonce. We have to just take it.
Tone it down a little bit.
But I like it. I mean,
Right.
so it's meeting them where they are.
Right.
I'm all about a sustainable economic and educational platform for them. And the community just exposing them to contemporary ideas in a all-black neighborhood.
So, but that space that it is a space where you found
Protection. Yeah. Love. Creativity. That I was accepted. I was okay. They may whisper out the side of their mouth, girl, you know he's a sissy, but they gave me place in that space. And I felt it was my home.
Is that what you're recreating with the foundation?
Yes, I think so. I'm absolutely creating a safe space where they can be vulnerable without having the eyes of the public looking at them and hearing about them being foster kids.
And coming in with their club clothes and you not being judgmental.
Girl, that's fine. We can do that's fine. That's a starting place, and then we move it to a place where you can. And you have to get. Class is so built in to our thinking, but we never talk about class in this country. And then we just want to do these blanket statements of race, black and white. Within black, there are so many blacks. There are so many whites. My God. So trying to get them to think that anything outside of this is white. There's classes of white. So it's not that much. It's maybe making three-dimensionally some of the things that I talk about. But I don't downplay getting and keeping a job if that's the first place in. It's just like education. Hugely. I think education is the best way out of any type of situation. It's the best way into something good, and it's a way out of something bad. But if you're not prepared, I wanted to teach like computer design and animation, and the guy said, Mark, you have to teach me how to turn on the computer first. So it's this kind of leveling of my expectations and quote unquote getting really real. Job training isn't sexy, but it's necessary, so it's both. It's both. And it's right in the hair salon. You know, we rent this place for $400 a month. And my mom was big on being a hairdresser, but she was never big in anything sustainable. We'd have it for a couple of years, and the guy would raise the rent, and there we go. We'd put it all in the back of the truck and find another place, and we'd close down on Saturday, open on Wednesday. We'd paint the walls and put everything, and we'd be back in business. So after about the fifth one, I remember saying, well, Mom, you should buy something. But this idea of things being very temporary, and historically, that's something I find that because of the way we've navigated this system.
Right. And I think that's a relic of a diaspora.
Oh,
you know, we're
absolutely.
used to that movement.
yeah.
We're told that
Girl,
we
you
are
don't know.
people who will just migrate. If things don't work out, we'll
Right.
move on to
Right.
someplace
You
else.
never know how long and how you're going to be here. You never know what's going to happen. Judgment. I mean, we have all kinds of excuses for not
Planting.
planting. And I was part of that. I was part of that. And my mom was she was great. She was great. She just believed in not buying anything.
But now you're planted in LA.
I seem like I'm really planted in LA, building things.
What are you building?
Well, I mean, I bought the place where the foundation is, and that's very, planting. But I'm not building.
And you also moved back to the street where your boarding house?
That's crazy. Yeah, I live on the same. So I grew up in a boarding house until. I don't know if you know that boarding houses were not that uncommon in the 70s. I think it was more like the 70s. All these big old houses that basically were owned by sort of wealthy people, black people started buying in the 60s and late 70s, and they would rent rooms. That was not, it's like Lackawanna Blues a little bit. It wasn't that uncommon. It's uncommon now to say that I grew up in a boarding house, but in the 70s, it wasn't that uncommon. Black women, single, would rent a room with usually one child or two children, and there would be like a house mother, mama, papa. So I grew up in a boarding house until I was 11. The difference is that people collapse them now, boarding house, bordello. They're very different things. And bordellos are fine. One was around the corner. It was just, we did not live in a boarding house. So can you believe I ended up living on the same street that I grew up in, just like down the street? Same street, Harvard Boulevard.
Well, and that is interesting to me, as I tell people, we had in the 60s and 70s this whole idea of success meant moving out. And one of the things I always like to ask people if they remember the Jeffersons, because if you remember the theme song of they moved up to the Upper East Side to show that they had made it.
Yeah.
And I find it very compelling that you've made it, and you live on the same street that you grew up on.
Yeah,
How do you, because we all of us, I don't live on a farm in rural Oklahoma, trust me. And I'm not trying to either. But so how do you then come to terms and really come up with your own sense of what is success for me? What does getting to the dream mean to me that allows you to be in the neighborhood, give back to the kids in that neighborhood?
Yeah, What? It happened so organically. I lived in a boarding house until I was 12, and then we moved to all-white Santa Monica. So from 12 to 18, I lived in all-white Santa Monica, very near the beach. My mom was she went through her hippie phase, and then after the hippie phase was the, praise Jesus phase. Nothing's wrong with Jesus. I'm just saying, no, there's nothing wrong with Jesus, but a lot of times people get very, let's erase that history and let's just go to, So it's interesting watching mom now she's a trucker. My mom's a really interesting person in her own right. But we were in the hippie phase, then the more Jesus phase, kind of Santa Monica. She never made a difference. She never said, oh, these people are better than the people when I'm in the hair salon. So I never made the difference.
Right.
I just knew they were different. I knew that they were racially different. But, so she never made any difference, so I never made any difference. So I suppose it was easier for me because I never had these people are better than those. I think my mother would have just like knocked me upside the head. I mean, a couple times when I was going to schools, and I remember 13, and I was in an all-white school, and all the kids were going off on spring breaks, and they were going all skiing. And I remember I came home, and I said, well, where are we going for spring break? Are we going skiing? And I remember, what? Skiing?
We're going to the hair salon.
You're going to work in the hair salon, boy, over the spring. So obviously, because you're it's just your peers, you start to, but I never made that better than, so I kind of never had that problem, and yeah, I just never made a problem.
A lot of people here on Brandeis campus, and you've said that you really felt that social justice means something and that you could.
Yeah.
So how can, for those of us who are interested in social justice, who work in social justice, especially the artists, how would you translate your social justice message or your mission in ways that maybe they can pick up on? What is it that they can do if they are truly, as an artist or as a historian, as someone who is an observer of culture, how can they connect that with ideas for social justice in your mind? And I'm particularly interested in art because we are here, and it's so obvious to me how you've engaged a social justice message. But and maybe there are some artists here who aren't quite there yet.
I think whether you like it or not, you become an authority of whatever you're doing. You become secure, you lose your vulnerability. No matter how much you think you're vulnerable, this environment is university. It comes with class issues, it comes with economics, it comes with everything. Me included, you have to step out of your expertise and partner and collaborate with other people who have expertise in an area that you don't. It will humble you, and it will give them a sense of purpose and strength. For instance, if you have a PhD in library science, it's great, and you are at a Harvard University, that's great. I don't have a problem with that. But you can also go to an economically impacted neighborhood and work with their local library, completely stepping out of what you are comfortable with and stepping in. It's all really, that's what I do. I partner and I listen. Don't ever assume that you're not, when you're dealing with challenged people, I think, don't assume that you're on the same level, because generally you're probably not. Economically, you've gone to school, you have access to things, you have access. So how does one balance that out a little bit? How do you make yourself a little bit more vulnerable so that you can relate a little bit more? You got to step out, and it sometimes hurts your feelings. I get my feelings hurt a lot. I was like, ouch, I don't want to do that, and I don't know anything about that, and I have to listen to this. But it's good. It's not good for you that you learn your métier, whatever it is. Good for you. That's a good thing. And I am sure, I don't know if you're an art historian or if you're a politician or if you're a lawyer or if you're an artist, there is an organization that is overlooked, has no access, and could totally use you. Find them. Simple. Just find them. You knock on their door. They won't come to you because they don't have access to this. But when you come to them, that's how I found the Right Way Foundation. I just knocked on his door. They won't come here because it, unfortunately, right now is a one-way street. But we can open the conversation. I mean, oh my God, I can't, but like being here with Anita Hill is, this here is everything I'm talking about. This is it right here.
Well, let me ask you another question.
Oh, girl.
So now we've sort of talked to us here in this room. If you had a message to give to the established art world,
Oh.
just ignore that man over there, part of the man. What is your message?
God. Oh, Lord.
It can be about your art. It can be about social justice. It can be about colonization.
You guys got a lot of smart ideas. And
What are they missing?
this, I mean, I would say come down a little bit out of that empirical tower that we build. It's okay. We can, I always said that the art world has a lot of ideas and popular culture has a lot of people. Not a lot of great ideas, but a lot of people. So how do you get them two together? I did a talk in San Francisco, no, at Chicago, I did it, Chicago, what,
The MCA Chicago?
When I had a show, MCA Chicago. It was your show.
Yeah.
And I had
Help us out here.
I had to do the artist talk, right? I didn't want to do the artist talk at the museum. I said, oh, let's do it in a big church, a Pentecostal church.
Ooh.
And they were like, oh no, Mark, we don't have that demographic. I said, well, go get that demographic if you want me to have a talk. So you know what? I talked to the Reverend, and I had to meet with them to make sure that I wasn't going to say any bad words, the content was respectful, and that's fine. You should do that. And you know what? Right after the sermon on Sunday, we have a young man here, and he's going to give an artist talk, and that screen came down, and the whole congregation, I had an artist talk. That was the best artist talk I've ever had. It was a true communication back and forth. I think that the art world can go out more, and they can have other relationships to other groups. I could book you from here to 2018. Oh my God, Anita. We need you. We need you in the art world.
I will go with you. I will go with you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So that's what I think we can do. That's what we can do. I mean, we can, I told the kids, I'm going to tell them one more. You know those apocalyptic movies? Where everything has exploded, and the highways are still there, but it's all these dead cars, and all the people have to run in between the dead cars to keep making it. It's like Walking Dead or something like that. This is what I think of humanity. We have all the highways to connect us all, but we got too many dead cars, and we can't move as fast through them. So it may be idealistic, but I just want to move some of the cars out of the way so that we can move faster, that communication and connections can happen.
Well, I promised you a love letter, right?
Yeah.
I told him I had a love letter for him. And this is a sort of, because I've, just know so much about him as an artist, and I was hoping to know more about him as an individual, and I had one profile. And it was wonderful, and we connected just on that profile alone. I've been watching the Roosevelts, the series, the Roosevelts, and one of the things stuck out at me. There was Mary McLeod Bethune was an advisor to Eleanor Roosevelt, and as the story goes, she went to the White House to see Mrs. Roosevelt, and she was intercepted by a gardener, a white gardener, who referred to her as Auntie. And her response was really a response a response to being disrespected. And she said, she looked at him and she said, "I'm sorry, which of my sister's children are you?" But I love the phrase, "which of my sister's children are you?" Because I think it can be interpreted and said, depending on the context, in so many different ways. And I would say that to you. I have 3 sisters who have children in Los Angeles. They have sons and they have daughters. I'm the youngest of 13, and some of them are, my nieces and nephews are older than you are. And so I say in all respect, as I talk to you and listen to you, I can see that you are one of my sister's children. And it is beautiful. So, that was my love letter.
This is the easiest job I've ever had as a moderator. I've been basically an audience member, so we can do one of 2 things. I can ask one more question, which will push you both a little bit, or we can open it up to the audience. So maybe one very quick thing. So this symposium yesterday, Jack Whitten was there, and I'm not sure whether Jack is in the audience. That may condition slightly what I say. I don't think he's here. Okay, so a little bit more latitude. He was part of an artist panel, and he was asked a question about the origins of his abstraction. And you'll all recall that Jack had a show in here. It was called Light Years, and it looked at his paintings from 1971 to 1973. Paintings that he hadn't seen since the day he executed them. He had no market, no public profile, no nothing. Those paintings were stretched for the first time by us and installed on a wall for the very first time. So when he was asked a question about the origins of his abstraction, he told a story about growing up in Alabama, being born in 1938, being the subject of a very violent white culture of racism. And he was very clear about saying those were evil people. He talked about his father, seeing his father killed with a shotgun when he was 15 years old. And somebody asked me after the panel, why didn't he talk about his painting? And well, first of all, I had to control myself slightly. And why did he speak so much about his life? And my initial response was, well, for over 6 decades, he didn't have much of a voice. But the voice he found way back then was abstraction. And the reason for the abstraction was because figuration was impossible in the wake of an event so overdetermined by violence. So what I took from that was sort of a further verification of the idea in my mind that all of the greatest artists are fundamentally autobiographical. I think you could say it about Ellsworth Kelly, you could say it about Mark, you could say it about David Smith, you could say it about William de Kooning. So the question I wanted to pose is one about individuality. And you talked about this a great deal to the students earlier on, that it's great to be part of a collective, but what's really interesting is what's peculiar about you. And you two have very, very distinct stories. Both of you have distinct stories, came from specific places. And looking in from the outside, you could say that the course was an unlikely one, and a very individual one. So I just wanted you to reflect on your individuality. And if you would say one thing about what makes you an individual, in that sense, what would it be?
An individual as a professional, or in what I do, in the work that I do?
As a public figure who's also a very personal public figure,
Right,
let's say.
Right. I think you have to go back to sort of where I was as a professional before, and to sum it up, why is my work, why is my teaching now really autobiographical? When I was teaching law in law schools, we relied primarily on the text of legal opinions, most of them issued by Supreme Courts, either the US Supreme Court or state Supreme Courts, but the courts of last resort. And we were attempting to use those to teach the law. And especially, and what I found was that there's a real deficit in doing that, especially if you're teaching about equality. Relying on the Supreme Court's pronouncement of the law misses a whole lot. It really misses the stories of people, how they live the experiences of equality or inequality. And so the abstractions that come out of the Supreme Court need to be contextualized. They need to be given perspectives. And that really did come out of my experience in 1991. That this legal rhetoric and the language that we use to describe what we think of as equality is really just an abstraction that needs to be given context. And so that has changed entirely, for me, the way I think we should be teaching law. And it has changed the way I teach. And I have a variety of sources I use that I won't get into. But that, I think, is what makes is the impact of my individual experience. And what makes me an individual today in the classroom and really in the way that I present and talk to the public about law.
Wow. Mark?
I'm done.
I think probably because my mother did not have parents and the kind of moral, ethical, social behavior that a parent passes on to you, that chain was broken. I think my mother instantly became postmodern. Her mother died when she was 3 and she lived with relatives mainly. And I think her existence was very hybrid. So when I came on the scene, I knew very early that the collective sometimes would support me and sometimes it wouldn't. And I never mourned it. I never lost sleep. I never cried. Why don't they all like me? Just as long as a couple of people like me, I was okay. I think that experience of not having that kind of biological lineage, coupled with living in a boarding house, which further pushes you away from family, made us very kind of comfortably individual. I didn't know anything different. So I suppose I got comfortable with it. And I don't think that I would have, if I had I didn't have a father, I had a mother. Well, I had a father. I don't know if people say I didn't have a father, was immaculate. I did have a father, but he was not in the home. He never was in the home. Again, I never mourned it. So I think that I never was surprised if the quote unquote collective turned against me. I didn't feel like they needed to understand everything about me. I was very forgiving when certain things would happen because I would just understand that they were uninformed. So they would just bring to me very traditional ways of thinking. You live in a boarding house with those people, so you're X, Y. I never got upset with them. I was just like, well, that's just a very narrow way of thinking. So I think those experiences.
But I can piggyback onto that a little bit too about the collective. I think in my professional life, one of the things that I would say is that the collective does not necessarily, or the people who govern professional life for law professors may not accept the way that I think about law or the way that I present law outside of in the real world. But I have sort of adapted and maybe even embraced the idea that you can be rejected by the collective and emerge much stronger for it. And also that the pendulum does swing. And so that if you stay true to yourself, that own individual self, either the collective will follow or you just don't even care.
Well, that's the same. We have the same. It wasn't because the pendulum does swing sometimes. I'm sitting here, but I still remember sort of when it was the other way.
Exactly.
And I don't.
You shouldn't ever forget.
Oh no, that's probably the thing that I remember the most. But it's always, if you never forget, you can keep reminding people not to forget. I mean, I think that's probably where all the work, like, we can't forget. And the collective, they love you, I love you, hate you, in, out. That's not something I've ever really thought about that much. You know, the only thing I don't like, I just don't like to be beat up. Physically, I just don't like someone to be, anything else, I'm okay with. But just I don't like to be hit.
Right.
Unless I have a gun or something, like, don't hit me, or something. Other than that, I don't.
You can deal with it.
I'm okay with it.
Yeah. Okay. I'm with you.
So we have some time for some questions. I've been at Brandeis long enough to know that there are going to be questions. So, yeah, go ahead. We don't have microphones for you. You're going to have to speak. Actually, we do have a microphone right there.
Hello, Professor Hill, Mark Bradford, and Christopher Bedford. I was at the symposium last night. I want to thank you just for your comments today and for all the comments yesterday. My name is Dell Hamilton. I'm an artist. My question for Mark is more about a formal question in terms of how do you decide, or how did you make the shift from performance to painting and abstraction, and then how do you decide when something should work as a sculpture or as a painting, and how do you think about the scale of things?
When you say performance, you mean like the basketball video?
The basketball videos in the early part of your career. I just always kind of wondered when you thought about how to do that. I work mostly in performance now, but I've started to go back to drawing again, and I'm starting to understand my own physicality in making art, but I'm trying to, I guess, since you've been doing this longer than I have, I'm trying to figure out. Well,
I find that the social work or the performance work or the video work, it seems to be directly dealing much more with social issues, just straight on, whereas the paintings allow me a little bit more abstraction to play. I need both. I need the abstraction, and I also need that sort of head-on. I do them based on what the show is. I will have a painting show, and I'll usually do paintings, or it will just be an open show, and I may try to do a sculpture. I'm constantly looking for ways to engage myself and keep myself interested in what I'm doing. For me, I really feel like I just got out of grad school. I don't let the market or the critics or people tell me, or the awards tell me. I've been an individual this long, I'm certainly not going to give it up now. So it's just basically on a basis of what the program is and how I can push it a little bit. I knew that I wanted to do this kind of feeling in here. I had been here before, and I knew I wanted to engage that wall because you could see outside. It just depends on what you have to say. I'm always feeling my way through it. You know, I would love to tell you, you can look at my CV and it looks all, no, I am not a confident artist. I'm kind of an insecure artist in my studio. Oh God, and every time I finish a painting, I think it's the last painting I can ever do. I think I'm gonna have to go back to the hair salon. I'm not one of those, I got this. And you know, I think it has to do with positionality, and I think it has to do with maleness and certain who is allowed and who's not allowed. I'm always amazed if there's like one orange left in a bowl. Some people will just walk right up and take that orange. See, I won't. I'll hold back and see
Somebody else might want it.
Somebody else might want it. It's how we're learned to occupy space and who's allowed to occupy more space and who's allowed not to occupy more space. I think women relate to that more. I mean, I got the memo what kind of space I could occupy real early. Sit in the back and shut up. So it's just depending on where and how. I don't think that, I heard when you're saying, oh, I was doing this type of work and now I'm moving into this. It sounds like you don't have to make those breaks. Don't do that, because they're artificial. And what will happen is you will go back. If you stopped at 4, even if it's 40 years from now, you'll go back and you go 5, 6, 7, 8. You ever do those makeover shows and they always make over the women? I always think I want to go back and visit those, because most of the time a woman's going to go back to the way that she feels comfortable. And who is somebody to tell her that that's wrong? So it's the same thing with the practice. It doesn't, just let it all go at one time. It doesn't all have to come together and make sense. You do video, you do sculpture, you do painting, it's fine. Let history work it out.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's kind of an amazing experience to sit in here during the talk and kind of spend a lot of time with the painting. And it's like really, really great.
Can everybody hear? Do you need to go there? Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, it's on.
It's kind of an amazing experience to sit in a room with the amazing paintings and see them for over an hour, and they kind of unfold and change and kind of respond to a lot of what you've been talking about. And I'm wondering a little bit, just kind of piggybacking off the previous question about the kind of decision making within one of them. They all kind of read very differently. They have different sort of narratives and stories and layers and psychological aspects. But it was a real privilege to kind of allow that to happen over duration.
What do you mean?
Just to sit here, you know, during the talk, and kind of like riff off the paintings well. But I'm just curious about the kind of decision making or stories within each one.
Well, you know, and it is just how I work. A lot of times, especially as a painter, you're kind of trained to do like series of work. You call them all autumn, or a very painterly thing to make a series of this and a series of that, and they kind of all look and have the same feeling. I do try to do that. It doesn't tend to work out that way. It just doesn't work. So I usually get 5 or 6 canvases, and I start one. I get 70% through it, and I start the next one. So I piggyback on what I've learned from this one and the next one. I'm very insecure. I have to pull what I learned from this one into the next one. I'm a pragmatist. I have to see it to believe it. Every painting is a relationship for me, from the little flirting glance in the cafe all the way to the divorce court, and everything in between. Every painting. So once they leave, that's an old relationship. We divvied up the car, the kids. I'm done with you. I'm like, you know, they're intense. You know, and they all don't go well. I'm not sometimes, you know, sometimes like they come out so easy. I think it's you know, some relationships you get into, you think, oh, I got this. This is going to be easy, and it turns out to be Psycho 101. Or you think, oh, this is going to be a problem, and it turns out to be a very easy relationship. It's like that with Anita. I just felt instantly like, and my friends were like, oh no, don't you get up there in front of her and act a fool. So I had the act a fool stuff in check. I think, you know, I was telling a story. So everything is like a relationship, and this one, 2 years in my studio. This one, I held up the truck because I had finished the show. It was already gone. Everything was And I was working on this one in the studio, and I said, oh, I think I got a winner here. So I called Christopher, and I said, oh, God, I'm sorry. Can I piss off everybody? The registrars are going to go crazy. I'm very intense. And I'm not really that happy about it, but it's just the way that I work. I don't know if you guys, I don't know how you work, Anita, but I tend to convince myself that I'm logical and linear. And when I start work, I'm logical and linear, and this is going to be fine. It's not going to get intense. It's not going to get emotional. It's just going to be fine. That lasts about 2 hours. And whoever you are, whatever your way is, it's like, it just comes through. I don't make the work that I think I should make.
Right. You
But
make the work that's there.
But it's so me.
Yeah.
Every time I see myself in an interview, I don't say the things that I think I should say. I should talk like Anita.
Then
But
that would be
it's
you.
so me.
And it would be
It's
so
too
boring
much
if
me.
you did me.
No, it's too much me. So it's that grappling with what you think you are and what you are. And I am a pragmatist. Honey, that's you. And girl, that's you. That's just how I am. So.
Can I ask you a question? As I said, I was done, but I have a question. So, in 2012, you have an exhibit in Texas, El Paso, Texas.
Yeah.
The title of the exhibit,
Girl.
I want to see you act out with this one. With that ass, they won't look at your eyes. Tell us about that exhibit.
That exhibit. Yeah, well, that exhibit was about, on one hand, okay, it was a constitution. It was in El Paso, and they were having a lot of conversations about the border and legislation and immigration. And since I'm in Los Angeles, the border issues are huge because Los Angeles and Tijuana are very close. It really informs South Central, the racial tension between the black and browns. We've had these long histories and everything. So El Paso, which is across from Juarez, so these were 4 panels of the Constitution, and I thought putting them in Juarez, you can't see what we're trying to get to because of the subterfuge around immigration. And I got that from, I got that from a friend. Well, with that ass, you ain't gonna look at her ass. What did I say?
With that ass, they won't look at your eyes.
Right. It's about things that get in the way of you actually having a conversation. I'll pull things from language, and they did email me. Mark, we're just checking to see if you're okay with this having, well, I did actually have an interesting thing happen where I was doing a show, it was gonna be a survey show, and what I wanted to name the show, they really pushed back, the publisher, and would not
Call it that?
Would not make the book that says Mark, the name of it. And it really was not a rough title at all. It was You're Nobody Till Somebody Kills You. I thought if you're doing a retrospective or a survey, well, why not, right? Because that's what they're going to do. It's my resurrection after they said, no, Mark, maybe for funding or maybe they just didn't feel like that was the right thing to do. I was saying, why not just
put it out there?
Put it out there. You are putting your whole body of work of the last 10 years up on the block.
Were you afraid that somebody might kill you?
They kill you in the press.
Yeah.
Sure they do.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely they kill you. Yeah, and you resurrect. It doesn't feel good to have things said about you, said in the press.
What's that feel?
And you had I was telling her a story about that time and how important it was for me on an individual level, that even in the hair salon, these women knew that something was going on that was important. And I remember my mother took our television from home and put it in the hair salon so we could watch her. And that was just, they knew.
That was when we first met.
That's when we first met. And we commented on the hair. So,
of course.
Of course we did, She looked good today. Girl was looking good today, But we personalized it because going back to what we were talking about earlier, she allowed us into her vulnerability.
But I do think it is very interesting how you can say things with your art, but then they censor how you want to describe them. I think that's fascinating.
Oh, well, you know.
But you've said the same thing with your art.
And I said it as soon as I could get up on that podium, you know, I let them know. But, well, yeah, with that, yeah, that was a fun, yeah.
Well, that was my question. What does that mean? Anyway, it's provocative, and I would love to, it sounds even more interesting now that you've described what it was.
I'll send you some images of it.
Okay, great.
So any more questions from the audience? We have time. Yeah.
Hello. I'm an abstract painter here in the area of Boston, and I'd like to ask Mark how you came to devote yourself to abstraction as opposed to a more narrative, symbolic form of painting, especially since you come to it with a lot of feeling for content and ideas, as well as the notion that's around today that abstraction somehow is passé and has to justify itself for still being here.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It was a political action, really. Is it possible to empty out race? Can the container of race truly be emptied out? There was a saying, sort of post-black. Is it possible to empty out the container of race? There was a movie, Lucy. Did anybody see Lucy? It was a Scarlett Johansson. It wasn't a sort of a great, but it was about someone that through a drug, more of their brain, they could access more of their brain. So it starts off with her 10%, 20%, 30%, 40%. At the end of the movie, it's 100% and the body disappears. She's nowhere and everywhere. And I think if we could do that with race, what would race look like? What would blackness look like if we just constantly, it erased itself until there was no blackness? Well, that's impossible. It's impossible. And of course, I wouldn't want it to be. But what I'm really interested in is, do these look like black paintings? Well, I'm black, and I make them, so therefore, they're black, right? But what does that mean? I'm always challenging the idea of something. What does something look like to be anything, to be a woman, to be black? What does that look like to challenge it? I had a studio in South Central. I was black, and I thought, I have no idea what that looks like. And I really like that. Do my paintings hold a black essence? I don't know. You know, I really don't know.
So you mean if somebody walked in here and saw your paintings, would they say, a black man did that painting, I know it?
Or would they?
I don't know.
Someone
what do you think?
But I am black. See, that's what I think the conversation starts to get interesting. But I am black.
What does it mean to be black?
What does it mean to be black? It's sort of like when someone's on the phone and you assume that they're one nationality, they walk in, you go, oh, I thought you were white.
Well,
I mean, what does that mean?
Right. Well, I have a phone story that I called one time to a neighborhood shop where I grew up. I was asking to get some work done for my parents, and the owners of the shop were white. And we had a lengthy conversation about what I needed, what I wanted for my parents, and they recommended a man to do the work who happened to be my cousin. And then they said, but I want to tell you, he's a black man. And I assumed that whatever my voice was, or the fact that I was making a request to get services, meant that I could not have been a black person, but who had to be warned that the person I might be hiring would be a black person. All of the assumptions that we make about race based on things that we think a white person must be saying this. This is a kind of request a white person has that have to do with race and economics and then the way we express ourselves.
Absolutely.
And it seems to me that that's part of what you're talking, the way you express yourself. Of course you're a black person, but It's not something that people can stereotype
Yeah, I don't have a
into
problem.
blackness.
Right, I don't have a problem being black. I have a problem with the easy equations and the easy stereotypes and the easy assumptions that are put on it. I don't have a problem being black. Just don't give me the definition. I'm fine, I'm good. So for me, I'm black, and I make these paintings, so, there was someone who said to me, oh, when I first walked in, I didn't know you were black. When I saw these paintings, I didn't know that they were done by a black person. That was fine, it's really interesting, but I am black, and that's where the conversation starts.
Yes, you are.
I am black. Every time I look in the mirror, I'm like, oh. So what does that mean? And it should be ever evolving. It should be ever evolving. I mean, come on, it's like colored, Negro, black, African American, give us 10 more years, we'll be something else. So if the name is constantly evolving, I think that the kind of what it means, and I just embraced that. So I just thought, my teachers told me, well, Mark, you're giving up a lot by doing that. And I said, giving what? Well, you know, you're just giving up a lot by being an abstract painter. You have so much content, Mark. And I'm like, yeah, I get it. South Central, sexuality, and all that. I didn't want, space to play. And freedom. Within hot subjects, like we were talking about Tulsa. They're abstract paintings, but they're based on it's Black Wall Street and the social uprising, and we were talking about it earlier, but they're still abstract paintings. I need to give myself, even within horror, space. Can the Holocaust ever be purely abstract? No, I don't think so. I don't think so. Blackness can never be fully abstracted, but the conversation around it has to keep moving, and that's what I do within the work. Yeah, I'm black, and that's constantly evolving, and I make these paintings and these kind of flat sculptures, right?
But can I just say one more thing? But unlike most artists who feel like they're free to make that choice, whatever intuitively they feel they must be, you felt like people were predisposing you to paint in a certain way.
Figurative,
or that box.
I need a space for me to play. You know, play is a good thing. Play is a good thing. I wanted to play in my work. I wanted to have space, and I wanted to have freedom, and I wanted to be in South Central, and I wanted to be black, and I wanted to be male, and all this stuff, and so I just gave myself some room. And it's a socially, I call it more like social abstraction more than kind of, it's from the social. I take the social and I abstract it to a point. But I think the vestiges of the social still cling to it. You still kind of know that it comes from a place. Then that's...
But I think it's just an amazing gift, just that conversation alone, to get people to thinking about what is blackness.
Yeah.
And so that if you do a certain kind of art that is that's entirely predictive, then that conversation doesn't take place.
Well, because you're supported by the narrative.
Right.
And you're embraced and welcomed. But as soon as you go against the narrative or something that doesn't look what the collective is comfortable with, then you're rejected.
Right.
So I just thought, reject me from the beginning so we can get to it.
So I think, unfortunately, we're out of time. But I know I'll never forget the conversation in front of this painting. And it was an amazing experience for me as basically an audience member. So thank you for that. It was great.
Thank you. Thank you.
And
Thank
I
you
know I'm
for the
thanking you on
privilege.
behalf of the actual audience too.
Chad, he would have been wonderful. Thank you all. Thank you.